All right, here we are, APM and geography, Mr. Bidwell. This is resource issues, key issue 4. Today's content objective, explain the reasons and strategies to resource conservation. By the end of the lesson, please be able to demonstrate your understanding of the following I can statements. Number 1, explain the difference between conservation and preservation to sustainable techniques. 2, define biodiversity and explain the concern for carrying capacity. 3, discuss the key strategies to sustainability and economic growth. And 4, explain the 3 United Nations suggestions to reducing fossil fuel usage and the resulting pollution. Sustainable development. What is the definition? It meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. Um, so what we ultimately look at is looking at the global world. We see that going back to what we learned earlier, China surpassed the United States as the largest emitter of CO2s in 2006. We also see that the United States emits as much carbon dioxide as 33. One person in the United States emits as much carbon dioxide as 33 residents of Ghana. On the other hand, Japan and many European countries achieve high standards of living with much lower per capita carbon emissions. Sweden, for instance, per capita carbon emissions are less than one-third of those in the United States, largely due to government and individual commitments to lifestyle and technology change in promoting environmental sustainability. So when we look at sustainability, a country's per capita income increases, its per capita carbon dioxide emission increases. So sustainable development has to find a balance between those two. As we see with Scandinavian countries, as I already mentioned, Sweden, when we go back to their level of development, they're quite high. They have a quite high standard of living as well as HDI. And we also see that they have some of the highest sustainable development standards with their low carbon emissions. Sustainable development, again, as we can see in this line graph, as you continue to make more GNI per capita, gross national income per capita. Remember, gross national income is the goods and services sold within a country and outside the borders of a country, and on an annual basis per family or per person, and we can see the amount of CO2 emissions increasing. Conservation, that means the sustained use and management of natural resources. So again, you're maintaining the current levels, you're conserving them, so future generations will have those same levels of water or quality of water, air, and wildlife, as well as including medicine, food, and recreation. Preservation is maintaining present conditions with little impact. So again, for future generations, there would maintain so there is potentially more with population increase. The carrying capacity is the constraints placed on resources. Biodiversity, again, when we go back to Unit 1, we talked about the various spheres of the world, the lithosphere, our earth, our hydrosphere, our water, and then our biosphere is our biodiversity, the species that inhabit our earth. And that includes both animals and plants. Geographers are concerned with the biogeographic diversity. They're concerned with genetic diversity. The World Wildlife Fund has said the world surpassed sustainable levels in the 1980s. We can see this with 5,000 species going in danger or extinct on an annual basis. And then we also saw with the Amazon rainforest, they contain half of the world's species and potential medicines for the world. All right, here's a video. Here's another video. All right, we can see sustainable development. We can see the largest carbon emitters per capita in areas of the world where they're yet to rapidly develop. All right, United Nations. Ways that they suggest that pollution can be reduced with fossil fuels. One is a sharp decrease in the use of the three fossil fuels. So we learned about one of the largest carbon emitters in photovoltaic or photochemical smog is the automobile, and that primarily uses petroleum. And then we know houses primarily use natural gas, and then large plants or industries or skyscrapers use coal. When we talk about the three fuels, remember back to sustainable goals of 2030, the developmental goals. One of the goals was to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy for all. The UN goal is to increase the use of alternative energy. And then also with that, they are talking about in goal number 7 of eliminating the use of fossil fuels. Goal number 3 is to increase renewable energy. All right, and so when we talk about renewable energy, we're also tying it into the developmental goals, which is to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth and full and productive employment. The UN wants to increase GDP per capita in developing countries at a 7% rate with the introduction of renewable energy. So we want to also ensure sustainable economic consumption and production, such as reducing food waste and increasing recycling. There are many ways that we can introduce renewable energy that will help conserve our environment. We also see the use of carbon capturing. So capturing carbon, it involves the CO2 waste or byproduct of many forms of industrial production and transportation. And carbon capturing is where you're going to store the carbon in below Earth's lithosphere and stores for a lengthy period of time. And we also tie this into one of the sustainable goals, and that is to goal 15 of Sustainable Development Goal is to protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainable managed forests, combat desertification, and halt reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. And they also talk about in Goal 13 to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Global emissions of carbon dioxide increased by more than 50% between 1990 and 2015, and it's urgent that we take conservation efforts to reduce those carbon emissions. And this would be one strategy: carbon capturing, storage, that Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations. We can couple this with other urban sustainable development strategies we talked about with smart growth and new urbanism and mass transit, and mixed economic developments of new urbanism, planting more trees, more denser populations living together. A lot of those strategies coupled with these United Nations strategies. Again, this is a great video of looking at new urbanism. Slide 122. And when we look at the future, we see a reduction based on the years right here, 2010, and then we have projections for 2050. So really, we see increase in renewables, increase in nuclear, increase in biomass, an increase in natural, a decrease in natural gas. Sorry. Then we see carbon capture and storage with natural gas increasing with yellow. And then we see coal carbon capturing replacing all coal consumption and completely eliminating just coal consumption by 2050. And then petroleum we can see reduced significantly from 31% of our energy in 2010 to less than 4% by 2050. And if you want to look at some of the sustainable goals of the future for Minneapolis planning, you can go on the Minneapolis City Council webpage and look at their Sustainable Development Plan for 2050, and you can see that their plan entails many new urbanism ideas and ultimately the elimination of the car. All right, you can take a look at City of the Future, Singapore. It's an excellent video. Takes a look at sustainable development. sustainable urban development, reducing the consumption of fossil fuels, slide 124. All right, and that takes us to the end.